Hey, what's going on everyone? It's Justin here and welcome to the review of the Samsung Galaxy Note 7. As I mentioned last year, the Note line has really come a long way, and when I was in Vancouver for the press briefing of the Note 7, they brought along some of the original Notes to compare to the current generation. To summarize, the Note 7 for the most part was a design refinement, a spec bump, some camera improvements, and also some new features added to the S Pen. For the most part, a norm that you would expect to see in an annual device refresh. But being one of the most expensive flagship smartphones on the market, it is definitely not for everyone, and certain people are going to be using the major features more than others, so let's go ahead and get started with the review. Beginning with the specs, you will find a 5.7-inch Quad HD display, a Snapdragon 820 processor, 3500 mAh battery, 64GB of internal expandable storage, a USB Type-C port, and a 12-megapixel rear-facing camera that is the same that you will find on the S7 and S7 Edge. Talking about the design, this device feels and looks absolutely incredible. It is available in a number of different colors, including a full black, a new blue, and a silver titanium. And from seeing all of the colors in person, they all look great, but it is definitely a fingerprint magnet. The front and back is made out of Gorilla Glass 5, but from what you might have seen in Jerry Rig Everything scratch tests, as well as some early reports of Note 7 owners, is that the Gorilla Glass 5 is actually quite prone to scratching, though it is much more crack resistant. This is likely due to the coating found on the glass, but nevertheless it is quite disappointing to hear as this device already feels very delicate to use. The Note 7 has a display that curves nicely around the edge. Though it might have been ruled a gimmick a few years ago, it seems like the general consensus really enjoys the curved display design. From my personal experience, I absolutely love it, and it's not because I use any of the features of it, it just seems very nice to scroll around and looks great on the phone as well. And even with the 5.7-inch display, the device doesn't feel overly large to the point that it is uncomfortable. One way to solve the scratch and fingerprint problems though is with a dbrand skin, and as you can see here, the black on black looks incredible, so if you would like to pick one up, I will leave a link in the description section below. The Note 7 has probably the best display you're going to find on any smartphone, and that is a 2560 by 1440 resolution, 518 ppi, 5.7-inch Super AMOLED screen. I've been using the same adjectives for the past few S and Note line devices, and that is the display is just so crisp and so sharp, the colors just jump out of the screen, and there really isn't a real way to describe it except for seeing it in person, and it's just crazy how even by looking at it through the video and that it doesn't do full justice, it looks incredible. The Note 7's display also has HDR content support, which in my opinion is just a future-proofing feature, and that is something that you will find on some of the newest Samsung and LG TVs. A lot like 4K content is to TVs, it might be a number of years before HDR content is widespread, and there might even be a chance that it doesn't really become a mainstream thing like 3D technologies. But long story short, this is the best display you're going to find on a smartphone. I've always been a pretty big fan of the software experience on the Note line of smartphones. That's not to say it was my favorite on the S7 Edge, but it has definitely gotten better over the years. Samsung is continuing to make changes to TouchWiz and have a unique experience on Samsung smartphones. Though I will admit it was much more feature packed in the past, I still feel like Samsung is constantly adding new features instead of toning things down and keeping it simple. Although a lot of people would have liked to see a Nexus version of the S7 Edge, which we know isn't going to happen, that would have been the combination of the best hardware paired up with the best software. With the Note 7 though, the TouchWiz is actually a good thing. Without it, you're really wasting a lot of the hardware that this smartphone has to offer, and features like the S Pen should almost be disregarded completely without the TouchWiz experience. The interface is optimized in a way that the S Pen is something that complements the smartphone instead of just an additional feature that you often will forget about. The experience was very smooth and snappy, but instead of talking too much about the Android experience with the TouchWiz, let's give you guys a demo of the S Pen. Beginning with some of the hardware changes, here are the most notable ones, no pun intended. You are now unable to put your S Pen in backwards and permanently damage your smartphone like I did with my Note 5. In addition to that, the pen tip is now 0.7mm as opposed to 1.6mm on the previous Note, and the pressure sensitivity levels have been doubled from 2048 to 4096. A commonality between all smartphones is that when there is any water or moisture on the display, the touch functions just don't register. Something that was demonstrated to me is that the S Pen works perfectly fine when there is any water on the screen. The S Pen over the years has developed into something that is not only for taking notes and writing down memos, but for quickly accessing information such as translate, magnify, and glance features. Something I noticed when taking notes is that it doesn't actually feel too far off from the Note 5, even though the pen tip is about 1mm smaller. Something you will notice and will definitely have to get used to though if you're coming from the Note 5 is the fact that it does have a much thinner stroke and is far more accurate. Features that I personally use the most and tend to miss when I go back to my iPhone is the ability to screen capture and write something on it right away. So if you find an internet meme that you want to comment on and send to your friends, you can do that very easily using the S Pen. Something that I'm also a huge fan of is the ability to capture a GIF or GIF from anywhere, whatever you want to call it, and that's using the Smart Select feature. All you have to do is go to the video and any part of the screen you would like to record and just select the quality and start recording right away. This can be up to 15 seconds in length and you can share it and publish it from there. The last thing I wanted to show you guys is just the general drawing and writing experience on the screen using the new S Pen. Features that I didn't find myself using much at all were the translate, as it just seems to be very hit or miss to the point where it wasn't exactly convenient as it was supposed to. I'm someone who really just likes to use the S Pen for the screen capture, writing something down, drawing some pictures if I'm bored, but more specifically stuff like drawing on your Snapchats. The pen experience was incredible, and as you can see here, I'm just drawing all over the place and just testing out the new textures and how the harder you press on the screen, the sensitivity is able to be registered, the way the colors blend, and you can definitely create something extraordinary just from this smartphone if you're a great artist without having to make any sort of mess with paints, which is a problem that I experience all the time. The S Pen is still awesome, and as you would expect, Samsung definitely made it better this year, and it's really what still makes the Note a Note. In continuation of positives, the camera found on the Note 7 is probably the best out of any smartphone. It is the identical one that you will find on the S7 and S7 Edge, and I am definitely not complaining about that. You have the 12 megapixel rear facing camera with an f1.7 aperture and a 5 megapixel front facing camera with the same aperture, and both sides are able to record in 4K. The autofocus on this guy is also incredibly fast. It uses the same technology found on the Canon 70D, and that is the dual pixel focus system. This comes in especially handy when you're trying to just take your phone out and snap that photo, and with the ability to enable the camera with a double press of a home button, you're never going to miss a shot with this phone. As you can see, the images just look incredible. They're sharp, they're well balanced in the color, slightly on the cooler tone, and the exposure for the most part is spot on with the occasional overexposure. That being said, the colors are on the saturated side, and for the most part that is a pleasant experience when you look at it. Even though there is a decrease in the megapixel count from 16 to 12 in this year's models, images suffered no loss in quality, and it was merely for a larger pixel size to have better low light performance. The front-facing camera on the Samsung Galaxy S7 and Note 7 is also one of the best in my opinion, and that is because it is able to capture the widest field of view compared to any other smartphone. A lot of times when you're trying to take that perfect selfie, you can often mess up the framing or have troubles fitting everyone in the picture, but I can assure you with the Samsung smartphone you won't notice that issue as much. The video performance was just as impressive as the photos by being sharp, well saturated, well balanced for the most part, both in the exposure and the color. If there's one thing for me to pick out, it would be that the optical image stabilization just isn't as smooth as it could have been. You will notice a pretty prominent jello effect in some cases. A new feature introduced on the Note 7 is an iris scanner. If you've been watching my channel for a while, you might remember in 2014 I did a demonstration of eye tracking features of the Samsung Galaxy S4. Samsung has once again brought it into the forefront however, and instead of using the front-facing camera, it uses a dedicated scanner for maximum security. I personally thought it was a gimmick and didn't really care for it, but some of the useful applications may include when your fingers are dirty and the fingerprint sensor may not register, or when you're using Samsung's mobile browser, it allows you to authenticate your passwords just by using the iris scanner. Some of the drawbacks include if you're someone who wears contacts or glasses, which many other people out there do, the sensor will not work nearly as well, making it something that ends up taking longer instead of just entering a 4-digit PIN, a pattern, or a fingerprint. Generally speaking, it worked well for me, but it isn't something that I would use over a fingerprint sensor or a PIN. When it comes to the battery life, you would expect a device of this size to have a very large battery, because in the end it does have a lot to power, especially that massive 2560 by 1440 super bright display, a top-end processor and everything. But in fact, the battery isn't actually that big, coming in at only 3500 milliamp hours. And I know I shouldn't be saying only, but the Samsung Galaxy S7 Edge, for reference, has a 3600 milliamp hour battery, and it just doesn't make sense how a larger and taller device coming in at over 6 inches has a smaller battery with more to power, especially when you consider the fact that the S7 Active has a 4000 milliamp hour battery. In the end, this is one of the things that I noticed was a step back from the Note 5, and I found the battery life to be just around 3.5 to 4 hours of screen on time. That by no means is terrible, but it definitely could have been better. Some ways that you can optimize your battery life though are through a number of modes that Samsung offers, including one that actually lowers the screen resolution to conserve power. This is all good to have, but while taking advantage of all of the full capabilities of the Note 7, you're only able to get about 1 full day of use out of this phone. The device charges and syncs via USB Type-C, and they have also included an adapter in case you have many other micro USB cables laying around. Wireless charging is supported out of the box, and also on the bottom you will find a very small speaker grill which sounds absolutely awful. Probably the single worst thing about the phone, but there is also IP68 ratings, so that has to be put into consideration when it comes to these speakers. To wrap things up, I did mention at the beginning of the video that this is one of the most expensive smartphones that money can buy right now, and I've definitely taken that into consideration in everything I've said. With that being kept in mind, when you look at the overall experience that Samsung has offered here, they really haven't cut any corners, and that is good to see at this price. To anyone looking for a large Android smartphone, this is going to be my pick. With an incredible display, all of the security features that people in business or just anyone in general may like, beautiful design, and arguably the best camera on the market. Aside from a battery life that could have been a little bit better, and the fact that the new glass scratches quite easily, I don't really have any major complaints surrounding the smartphone that would question how much it costs. If you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like button, as this video took a lot of time to make, and also look out for a giveaway in the next few weeks, and I'll see you all in the next video.